Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. As we continue our series on the autistic experience and neurodivergent, we are going to shift for a moment and talk to who I believe is one of the experts in our area on supporting autistic individuals, specifically with their mental health, with their ability to fully live their best life, and just really think about what it means to be a professional working with an autistic population. I think that for parents listening, this messaging can be really confusing. You know, when your child gets a diagnosis of autism, there's so many opinions and go talk to this person and go get treatment from that person. And there's a lot of uncertainty around what that means to have autism or what it means to have treatment. What does treatment mean? And so today we're going to start that conversation around what the experts are saying from a neuroaffirming lens. And we're going to keep this conversation going. But today we are starting with my dear friend Sharon. Sharon Hammer, LPC, is a licensed professional counselor and educational consultant. Within the lens of being neuroaffirming, trauma-informed, and client-directed, Sharon provides psychotherapy and psychoeducation to neurodiverse clients. Sharon takes this experience into her trainings, where she focuses on teaching others effective ways to support neurodivergent people in ways that are positive, life-affirming, and based in an understanding of the nervous system. Welcome, Sharon. So good to have you here today.
It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Jen. I really appreciate it.
So, as we continue on in our series around neurodivergence, I wanted to start first by having you tell us a little bit about your work with neurodiverse clients.
Yes. So I have been working with neurodiverse clients since about 1995, which kind of dates me. I understand that at this point, but that is when I started. I worked with my first 2 clients that were autistic at that point. And during that time, when I started to work with autistic clients, I was getting my master's. So I was in my master's program for counseling. I have an emphasis in marriage and family therapy, but I was in that master's program and I really, really enjoyed the work I was doing with those clients. But that wasn't exactly what I was going to school for. And so we had about a year off of working with specifically neurodiverse clients where I really thought I had the story in my head that I needed to do what I got my master's in. And so I went and did in-home psychotherapy with families for about a year. And I really missed working with autistic people. And so about after a year, I got back into it and I have not kind of driven different ways since. That's been my career. And so now currently what I do is I serve clients in mental health. So I'm a owner of a mental health clinic in Madison, Wisconsin.
What is your clinic named?
Imagine Your Capacity, Counseling and Consulting.
Awesome.
And we recently, Jen, changed our name. So we have seen a lot of adult clients and our name used to have the word child in it. Mm-hmm. And we've had to change that just to reflect how many adults that we're seeing that were coming into our clinic and being insulted that we still had the word child in our name.
Yes.
And so about a year and a half ago, we had to make that switch.
Awesome.
Which has really helped for referrals too, for people who want to refer adults to us.
Yeah, and I'll for sure put your guys' website in the show notes.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, for sure.
Appreciate that. So our clinic, we see majority of people who are neurodiverse and also have other mental health disorders.
Okay.
Or diagnoses. So that makes up the majority of our clients. I also do a lot of work consulting to schools and Head Starts around mental health and around neurodiversity. And so that makes up the most of my current work.
Awesome. So in the work that you do, every day, I know the word neuroaffirming care, at least in our clinic, keeps popping up. How would you describe neuroaffirming care? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. And I think that currently it almost has like a little bit of a buzz to it that people use it a lot and kind of like throw it out there and put it on websites. And to me, at its core, what neuroaffirming care really means is not assuming that one neurology is better than others just because it may fall in the majority.
Mm-hmm. Let's give some examples of that.
Yeah. For me, personally, it's all about not making assumptions that my way of thinking or my way of living or my way of sensing is the same as other people do or live or exist by. And so just starting from a basis of your system of being, your system of thinking, feeling, sensing may be different than mine. And just because I may fall in the majority group does not mean that my way is right or correct, even though it has really defined the world. It's built to and defined the world for so long that it really is not. There's not one right way to be. And so that, I think, is how I would describe neuroaffirming care, is just that. It's about coming in, recognizing that the world fills us with assumptions about which ways are living our best, and being open enough to recognize when those assumptions come up.
Yeah.
I think that's
just beautiful. Yeah. And so then when I really think about, the buzzword neuroaffirming care, I guess, in our work, we're in the same city, kind of lots of clients floating around. We're seeing clients come in for all sorts of reasons. What are you seeing as the greatest needs for your autistic clients that you're seeing coming in for mental health treatment at this point?
We have a lot of clients who come into us with underlying anxiety, underlying depression. Sometimes they are medically already diagnosed, sometimes not, with also like a neurodivergence. But we see a lot of that. And like a lot of anxiety is probably the biggest, and the most that we see is just that, like that underlying anxiety.
Interesting. Yeah. And so when I'm thinking about some of the parents who might be listening and, trying to either weed out anxiety and autism or figure out how it fits together, what are some of the ways that a parent might be like, there's some underlying anxiety going on, with my autistic child, or, I wonder if I should look deeper or look further.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is my bias, Jen, so I'm going to say that I think that growing up autistic in a world that is not built for autistic people lends itself to autistic people just having other mental health diagnoses going on, as it does for many other minority groups or people that are underrepresented. And so I just think that is true. And so I don't want anybody to think that this is necessarily a bad thing or it means they did anything wrong. I don't want parents ever to think that. I think that growing up in a society that doesn't necessarily match your neurology can lead to anxiety or other mental health disorders just coming into being.
That makes so much sense to me. And I feel like what we see so often is the fit. I don't know where I fit. I don't know how I fit, or I'm trying to fit, and I'm using all of my expendable energy to try to fit into a system or an environment.
Yeah. So if I were a parent and I was looking for signs, I think I would look a lot at what I know your clinic does a lot of, Jen, is just like regulation. So, is your child able to regulate on their own? Are you seeing an increase in like meltdowns, or an increase in just like not being able to handle the day to day? One of my favorite ways to measure this is just like, as we get older and we grow developmentally, the world should just naturally like get bigger for us.
Oh, yes.
As you grow, you interact with more people, you go more places. And if you at any point start to like see the biggerness, the more kind of like come back in and kind of like decrease, that to me is always a sign like, ooh, is something going on here. So when you start to see like your person you love talking to people less or wanting to go fewer places or interact with fewer, that's always a sign like, ooh, something could be going on here. And there is no, I want to say, as I'm saying that, I have no judgment around that growth. Like it goes slower for some people, it goes faster for others. But in general, when the world starts to get closer and there's less interactions and less options, that's where as a therapist, I'm like, ooh, what's going on here? Is there something else going on?
Then we want to think that through. That makes so much sense to me. We see so many teenagers. I talk to so many parents of teenagers who, previously had been maybe in a team of some sort or had been going to school, quote unquote, successfully, or had a group of friends who sort of that's kind of sinking into more just time in the room. Yeah. That's what you're talking about.
It is what I'm talking about.
A little bit. Yeah. That makes so much sense. And I feel like some of that, when we look at just development, right? Our kids going through these developmental phases, sometimes our teenagers are pulling away from parents, right? Developmentally, that's super appropriate.
It is.
And I think it takes a really astute eye to see, is this the part of growth, this part of development where child is pulling away from parent, or is child sort of pulling away from life?
Everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Yes.
A little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I see that come up over and over again in the work that we do with parents. And so in the work that you do, what are the ways to know that, the mental health therapy is effective or really supporting, or it's a good match of mental health therapist for an autistic client?
That's a really good question, Jen. I think if I were a parent and I were seeking out therapy for my child, I would really look for signs that it was neuroaffirming. And I'll give you some examples of that because I know that's a buzzword and anybody can put that on their website. Mm-hmm. So I think I would really look for meeting my child where they were at is huge. And
what does that mean?
That means if they are at a spot where all we're going to do during our session is co-regulate, we are just going to co-regulate. If you are at a spot where your therapy has to look like you're playing with puppets the whole time, that's what we're going to do. So I think I'm going to use the word neuroaffirming again, Jen, but one of the most neuroaffirming things that we try to do in our treatment is match what's going to work for their client. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're working within systems that pay us, but for some of our neurodiverse clients, autistic clients, the standard 50-minute mental health session may not be the best match. Mm-hmm. It might be 30. It might be an hour and a half. It might be 2 hours. And so it's looking at things like that. It's looking about your therapist that you're considering and how flexible are they to meet your child's needs where they are at. Because that would be the first red flag if you're bringing in a child to therapy and the therapist is like, well, we sit in this office and the client usually sits here and I sit here. That would be a huge red flag for me. Like if they're not providing your child with options that they need to access what they need to be in therapy, that's going to be problematic.
Yeah. Well, and we know that for so many of our autistic clients, sitting and talking isn't always a match. Again, those are some presumptions around how the brain works.
Very much. Yes. And so you have to have a therapist who's really comfortable with that. Like, are we going to be playing with puppets the whole time? Are we going to be out and walking in nature the whole time? Are we going to be out and playing Pokemon Go? Like, what are we going to be doing? Like, just really, really flexible with how we provide the therapy. Because you're right. The whole come in and sit down in my office and you're going to unload your deepest doesn't always work for all people in general, but especially when we have neurodiverse clients. That we're
Yeah. Now is your 35 minutes to tell your feelings for the week. Ready, set,
exactly.
go. It just doesn't, it's not the way it works. And I hear over and over again, well, I've tried mental health therapy for my autistic child and we're not getting anywhere. And I feel like giving parents some words around what to look for.
Yeah. I think I would also definitely look for therapists that are understanding the importance of using visual support, to put it to use things that we know support autistic neurology, which is making things like using visual schedules, a really simple, basic thing. But as a mental health therapist, me doing that is really, really helpful for all of my clients, letting them know before things are going to change, like having a way to foreshadow that for them. And so just having those things in place, again, would be a red flag if therapists didn't have like things like that in place for their clients.
That's lovely. Because really what we're doing is we're creating safety, right? We're creating safety in the nervous system. We're creating safety within the relationship so that the client can do some of the work around anxiety or whatever.
Absolutely.
Bringing them in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's the other piece, Jen. I think, sorry, you're getting me into the red flags.
No, go for it.
That I would, as a parent, if the therapist is like pushing to get into the like deep work fast, that would be a red flag. It's what you just said. It's like, you absolutely have to have the work to create, like, I think of it as like a bubble of safety in your clinic or wherever you're seeing your client. You have to have that. And if the therapist is like pushing and saying, well, they aren't really sharing with me the hard stuff yet, or we aren't really getting into unloading that trauma yet, that would be a red flag for me too, because you cannot rush that setting up the safety. There's no recipe for that, and there's no rushing it.
And there's no recovery from it. It takes a long time to repair that, in a relationship. And it makes sense to have a therapist who's willing to take the time and has the skills to really lay that foundation. For clients.
And it takes, as a therapist, it takes a lot of self-awareness. Yeah. Because coming out of grad school as a therapist, you are so pushed into like, this is what you do, and this is what you do with your clients, and A, B, and C. And if they're not doing this, and you kind of have to go off book a little bit and be confident in yourself doing that.
Well, let's be honest, unless I don't know of it.
Right.
I don't think CBT, which is like a traditional model for anxiety and depression, was created with a neurodiverse brain and mind.
It was absolutely not. No.
Right? And so you have to go off script.
You have to.
There's not a lot of other ways to do it.
There's not. Yeah.
I want to think about, for families who are really thinking about providers and how we provide providers and things like that. Let's talk about the family system for a minute. The system around our clients, what do you see sort of as the greatest need? How do you support the family system?
Yeah.
In your work?
Another really good question. Your question's so insightful. I think that how I see supporting family systems, which I love to do, it's about the parents being able to like, this is going to sound a little judgmental, Jen, but being able to like recognize who the true experts are. Because let me just say, like when you have a child that's like newly diagnosed with something, and if we're talking about, newly diagnosed with a neurodiversity, you have a lot of people who are, I'm going to say like quote unquote experts that are like telling you, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And one of the things that I always direct parents to is, especially now, okay, I can say it, we're in 2025, right? Especially now, the experts you should be listening to are the adults with that neurodiversity.
Yes. Yes. You can't say that enough. The experts we should be listening to are the adults who have that neurodiversity.
And I think, Jen, when you and I started in this field, there weren't as many. There were a few, but it wasn't like it is now, where we, like, any book you're buying off the shelf should have an autistic author. Like, it should. And so I think that is the piece that I really, when I'm talking to parents, I'm like, okay, so what are we doing to like get you connected? Social media, books, videos, whatever. What are we doing to get you connected to content that is by autistic people? Because that's going to get to my next point about really making sure that your home and your family is one of those safe places that I told you we like try to create in therapy, like making sure that your family is a safe place for your autistic child to be their autistic self.
Yes. Oh, it's giving me shivers because you're saying it so clearly. Yes. Yes.
And I think, unfortunately, listening to some of the, I'm going to put experts in quote, in the past, maybe historically have not led us necessarily in that direction. And I think listening to autistic people is really going to lead us more in that direction of like, how do we make our home the safest place we can for an autistic child to grow up?
And then, I want to take that a step further.
Please.
What does that mean? Let's say we have, a family who's really doing the work and finding safety. What are you seeing the outcomes for the child?
Well, I think if we had a family that was really doing the work, that's like huge. And I think like the outcomes for the child then mean, I think, less need to, I'm going to use the word masked, but that's like less need to mask when they're at home and they're in a safe spot. They can just be who they are. And what autistic people have told us time and time is like masking, again, when I listen to autistic people, sometimes necessary and always exhausting and always takes a toll on them. And so if we have children who are really able to just like access themselves as they are, I will see them less in my clinic. That's what's true, is we will see less like mental health concerns down the line if we're truly building them up and making them be aware of what they need and why they need it, and that it's okay to need those things. It's okay to process the world this way. It's okay to sense things this way, that it just leads to more self-confidence and less, mental health issues down the line. Yeah. I don't want any parent listening today, right now, though, to think that if they did all that, the world is necessarily a safe place, because they are still going into communities that may not be as neuroaffirming as their little homes are and their nests are. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think starting at home and starting with the family unit and starting right with the trusted caregivers is such a powerful place. And, the second question that's sort of roaming around in my head is, I just did an interview with a dad who, through his experience of his daughter getting a diagnosis, sought out his own diagnosis, right? And so the power of families, maybe there's some neurodivergence in a few members of the family, or maybe the parent truly understands the experience because of their own neurodivergence.
Absolutely. We see that all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're seeing that more and more too, where parents are starting to recognize, I wonder if this is something I need to look at for myself.
And I think if you have a space that's safe, that's not a bad thing.
No.
And I think that's the whole like getting rid of the ableism around it, is like, it's an okay thing. Like being autistic is fine. If that's who you are, that's who you are. And I think that sometimes allows parents to like have more ability to be like, oh, okay, maybe this is me too.
Beautiful way of saying it. Yes. Yeah. Like it's just as being able to honor who you are as a human. Honor who you are as a human.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's just lovely. And so we just talked about family and creating that safety in the home for the autistic child to truly just be themselves. And I am always dreaming and really have been spending a lot of time thinking about, okay, how do we affect change in our community? How do we affect change in our society? How do we start sort of moving that needle so that everybody's neurology is accepted as their neurology? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to be completely honest with you, Jen. Like sometimes this work and this part of it is overwhelming to me. And I just want to name that because I want other people to know that they're not alone if they feel that same thing. It's overwhelming to me. And what I believe, like at my core, is that one person can make a difference. I see it as like a web of interconnecting people, where if one person if you're a parent and you are treating your autistic child in a certain way that is very affirming to who they are, what you said, you just named it, honoring who they are truly, then other people see the parent doing that. And they start to like, the parent's almost like a model for that. Like, oh, this is how I honor this person. This is how I honor their autistic being. Other people will see that and it starts to kind of spread. And I have absolutely, in my work, again, been doing this a long time, I've absolutely seen that spread to schools and Head Starts and, just community, larger organizations. I have seen that just like one parent and the way they are talking about their child and the way they are interacting with their child. I have seen that make a shift in professionals' experience and peer experience too, as well, like friends and peer. And you see that shift change. And so I just think that overwhelmingness is true. And the other part that's true is that one person really can make a huge difference.
Wow, that's just lovely. That's just lovely. It takes a little of the overwhelm out, maybe.
It does. Sometimes.
For some of us, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave it there for today. There's so much more we could go into. And I feel like the message in your work, in the amazing work you're doing, is just so powerful of honoring our autistic clients and our autistic kids as they are. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Hello, Where They're Planted listeners. I wanted to pop on here and remind you of our Thriving Parents Collective online courses. If you like what you hear on this podcast and are seeking more, check out this resource. This course offers you over 9 educational videos and 50 pages of self-reflective workbook in order to guide you through the process of integrating connected parenting strategies into your day-to-day life. Listen when it's convenient for you and use the content as the foundation for a shared language between you and your partner or family members. In addition, access one-to-one sessions with a parent coach to support individualized strategies to help you meet your child right where they're planted. For listeners, access this course for $99 by using the code THRIVING at the checkout. We look forward to having you join our Thriving Parents Collective. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.